Hello and welcome back to my channel. My name is Christina and I currently live and work in the Dominican Republic, specifically in Santiago de los Caballeros. I am filming my experience of traveling abroad for 5 months before I start a master's program in the United States. And in my last video, I alluded to an experience that I had last time I was in the Dominican Republic with a horrible Airbnb experience. And I wanted to share it with you. And hopefully this doesn't happen to anyone else coming to stay in the DR. I've never had a bad experience with Airbnbs, really in general, and definitely not in the DR. This was by far the worst experience I've ever had with the platform. So yeah, let me just break it down. So basically, I had been out of the Dominican Republic for like 6 months, and I was coming back to Caballeros with my friend, and then I was going to be in Santiago for about 1.5 to 2 months right before Christmas. So this was last year, around November-ish. So my friend was going to be in Santiago with me for 2 weeks, and then I was going to be here for the rest of like the month stay. So my friend was going to be here, for the rest, or I was going to be here for the rest of the stay by myself. So I usually don't use Airbnb for long-term stays in the DR. It's just not the most like cost-effective. I like to use an app called Caballeros, and if you're familiar with the DR, you've probably heard of it. It's like Craigslist almost, but like less scammy, and people will list their apartments and like cars they're selling and stuff like that. So I like to use that, but for this case, it was such a short stay that just didn't even make sense. And I was on Airbnb and I found this new listing that had a couple reviews, but it was relatively new, so the price is pretty low. And then if you stay for a month, you usually get a discount on Airbnb, so the price was fine for what I needed. So then this is where everything starts going badly. First mistake I made was, here in the DR at least, it is not that common to find an Airbnb listing and rent it outside of Airbnb. So you basically just make sure it looks legit, look at the reviews, talk to the host, and then ask if there's any chance you can just rent outside of Airbnb, and a lot of the times that they will say yes, and you do it that way. Airbnb does not want you to do this, obviously, but usually you get a better price if you do. So that's what I did. I talked to the host, and he said sure, and ended up saving a decent amount as well. So the price was right, and I felt comfortable talking to him. I didn't feel shady or anything like that. So I sent a deposit before I even got to the DR, and everything was booked. So been in the DR for a month, and it's time to come to Santiago because we've been in Caballeros. So we get to Santiago, we get to the Airbnb. First of all, the host is not the person who's gonna let us in, which is fine, that's not that uncommon, but the host is in the US, which is a whole other thing. But so the host sends me like the number of a guy who's gonna let me in, and so I contact the guy, and I'm like, hey, we're gonna be there around like 7, will you meet us there? And he's like, oh, I can just leave you the key or something like that. Like something kind of weird and short, and I was like, at first I was like, that's fine, and then I was like, wait, no, I don't even know where the apartment is. Like, I don't know the apartment number. I don't know what like block it is in. Like a lot of the time, big apartment complexes here will have like block A, B, C, whatever, like normal, and then the apartment number, and I didn't know any of that. So I was like, now you're gonna have to meet us. But it was like a 30-minute process of getting this guy to agree to just go do his job and let us into the apartment. So we get to the apartment, the guy leaves, and on surface level, everything looks fine, although the apartment's definitely old. But then, first weird thing, there is a security camera in the living room. And to be fair, on the Airbnb listing, it does say that there's a security camera that I did not see. But it says that the only thing it's pointed to is the door, and that was not the case. The security camera could see the entire living room, a little bit down the hall, and into the kitchen. And it was just me and my friend, who's also a girl, and the owner is a man. And we're like, that's really weird. We're not cool with that, especially since it says it just sees the door. That was not true. So I just unplugged it, and I texted him, and I was like, yeah, we're not comfortable with that. And he's like, oh, I thought you saw it because it's on the listing. Like, it clearly says it's there. And I was like, that's fine, but like, it doesn't just show the door, it shows everything. So basically we came to the conclusion that I would just turn it on occasionally when we leave the Airbnb. Cool, whatever. We go to bed, get up the next day. So this would have been Sunday to Monday. We got there Sunday night, this would be Monday during the day. Me and my friend both work remotely from the house, and we're realizing it is really dirty. Like everything. Like I went to the bathroom and the person who had cleaned had not flushed the toilet, so there was stuff in my toilet. There was no new toilet paper. In her shower there was like hair. The kitchen was just like grimy, and not just like old, like it was dirty. Like it had not been cleaned. The floor had not been cleaned. So we're like, this is kind of nasty, but we can clean it. This isn't anything that's like a total deal breaker, but we did let the guy know. We're like, hey, whoever you have to clean is not doing their job. And he's like, oh, sorry, I've never had anyone complain about that before. That's pretty much it. Like no solution was offered. We were hoping he'd be like, I'll send someone to like go clean it again, but he didn't. Then the other thing that was kind of like adding up to all this was none of the closet doors would open. They're like those sliding type doors, and none of them would open. And it wasn't like they were locked, they were just old and would not open. So we're like, where are we supposed to put our stuff? I was gonna be there for like a month and a half, 2 months. And yeah, so we told him that too. He also like didn't offer a solution. Okay, so we're like, you know what? We can suck it up. It's a really good location, all that. This is where it gets horrible. The next day I wake up to a bug crawling on my face, literally on my face. I obviously freak out. It's not a fun way to wake up. I like sit up and I look at my pillow, and there's a ton of black bugs on my pillow. So I freak out and I get out of my bed. I like shake myself off because I don't know if they're on me. Thankfully I sleep with like a bonnet on, so I knew they weren't in my hair. And I look at the bed and there's like black bugs on the bed. So I take the sheet off and there's black bugs under the sheet. And of course, no, it's not like the bed was crawling with them. I would have noticed, but there was like at least 15, 20 black bugs. I start crying immediately, and I run and wake up my friend, and she's like freaking out because I'm crying. And I was like, I think there's bed bugs in my bed, because that's what they looked like. And like, what else was I supposed to assume? So she's freaking out, as one does. We've never dealt with bed bugs. We like Google a picture of it and compare it to one. We like picked one up, and we're like, that's for sure what this is. So we're freaking out. We don't know what to do. I'm like calling my mom. She's like, it's pretty common, but you have to like thoroughly clean everything. And I was like, well, we don't have the way of doing that. Like he's gonna have to clean it. And so I immediately start trying to call the guy. He's not answering. I call like probably like 4 times in a row, doesn't answer. So my friend and I start talking about it. We're like, realistically, this place is so old, and this couch is so old, and everything is so old. There could be bed bugs literally everywhere. And for them to actually come and clean it, like if anyone knows how the DR works, things take a while. So we're like, there's no way they're gonna get someone in here today to clean this. They could get all into our stuff. We could lay eggs. Like this is a bad situation. So we're like, we should just not stay here, basically. But again, remember, I didn't rent through Airbnb, and that's where this is awful, because if I had, I would have just contacted support, and I'm sure they would have just given me my money back, honestly. But they didn't, because I didn't rent through Airbnb. So I'm calling the guy for like probably an hour before he finally responds. And I'm like, hey, there's bed bugs. And he's like, oh really? No one's ever told me that. And we were so upset with the way he reacted. Like, we're like, okay, well, there are. Like, that's what we woke up to. So basically, I tell him, okay, well, there are bed bugs, and we're not comfortable staying here just because it's gonna take so long to get everything cleaned. Like, nothing was properly done. Like, this really wasn't managed well, blah, 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 blah. And he's like, no, I understand, but like I booked this out for you, so that means I'm not gonna be able to get anyone else in there. And so I wanna charge you for the nights you stayed. And this is what I didn't know happening either. He apparently had a contract written up since we rented outside of Airbnb that cost like $90, which if I had known, I would have just rented through Airbnb. So at this point, he tells me he had that written up and he's like, I want to charge you half. And so I was like, no, you're not going to charge us half. You can charge us one or the other, not both the nights and this. I can pay either or, basically. So I was like, this hasn't been up to standards at all. Thought we came to a conclusion. He's like, I will return you the money, blah, blah, blah. Fun other like side story to this whole time. My laptop had broken a couple days before and I was borrowing my boyfriend's, and a friend of mine was coming from Indiana to Caballeros, which is like 2 hours from Santiago. And that day that we found the bed bugs is when I had to go up to Caballeros and pick it up from her. If you ship anything from the US that's over a certain amount of like value, they charge you a ton. So I couldn't just ship the laptop to myself. I had to ship it to her and then she brought it to me, basically. So after this phone call, I'm like freaking out. I go get my boyfriend's car to go drive up to Caballeros. The Airbnb host calls me and he's like, okay, so this is the amount I'm gonna pay you back. It was way less than what I thought we had agreed on. He was trying to charge me again the 2 nights and the entire contract. And I was like, nope, that's not what we agreed on. And he's like, what do you mean? That's what we talked about, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, you know what, I'm driving. Can you please just contact Johan, my boyfriend? And he's like, okay, fine. So as far as I know, they talk to each other. But he calls me back in about 45 minutes, says the same thing over again. At this point, I lost it because he's trying to act like we're overreacting. I don't entirely remember what was said, but it was a ton. He was being pretty rude. He was truly not getting what I was saying. Yeah, just being not very helpful, not understanding the fact that like you literally just gave us bed bugs. So I lose it a little bit as I hadn't eaten at this point. I had barely slept. I'm trying to get to this laptop. I'm trying to figure out where the heck we're gonna move. So I'm like, please just contact my boyfriend. Cool, hangs up. 30 minutes later, genuinely calls me again. And he's like, okay, since you're wanting to leave, the other lady who manages it, not the guy who like didn't want to let us into the Airbnb, there's another person that helps manage it. I think she's the one who didn't clean. He's like, she'll be there in about an hour, so you guys will need to leave. It was like maybe 2:30 p.m. at this point. I was like, first of all, I'm not even in Santiago. Second of all, we never said when we were gonna leave. Third, you haven't given me the money back. And fourth, my friend works till 5 p.m. Like, none of that's gonna happen. And he's like, well, she's on her way right now. And I was like, okay, well, I'm not there. My friend doesn't speak Spanish. This lady doesn't speak English. Like, you're gonna have to wait. Please contact Johan. So I'm really, really flustered. I like, motorcycle. I pull up to the airport and I get the laptop, I get back into my car. And Johan calls me and he's like, all right, I worked it out. He's only gonna charge you for the 2 nights, whatever. At this point, I'll take my losses, although I didn't think it was fair that I was charged at all, because honestly, it was not okay. Like, the Airbnb was not okay. So I have to drive all the way back, and Johan's like, I'm gonna go over there now to help Sophie get ready, and the lady's on her way. And I was like, do not let her into the Airbnb until I have the refund, because I didn't want her to go in and lie and say it's not that dirty, and then have the guy not give me the money back, because it really was that dirty. But if she's the one who cleaned it and didn't clean it well, there's no way she's gonna like own up to the fact that she didn't do her job to her boss. So I was like, don't let them in, don't let her in until I get there and I have the deposit. So that's what they do. Johan and my friend don't let her in until I get there. The lady's outside when I get there. We're all like very stressed, trying to figure out what we're gonna do. We get all of our stuff out of the car, or out of the apartment into his car. And at that point he had given me the money back, so we give her the keys. And that was that, essentially. But then we had to figure out where to go. Johan, during this whole time frame, had reached out to a person who owned an apartment that I had stayed at previously, but during COVID. So we go there, she's like, yeah, you can stay here, I'll get it ready for you. We get there, it's super clean, lovely, all that good stuff. But I find a bug on the bed where I put my suitcase. So we're like, crap, they're in my stuff, because that's the only logical explanation. So that night I like spent the night in my friend's room because we didn't want to like contaminate anything. We put all of my stuff outside. The next day, without fail, at like 5 a.m., non-stop motorcycle revving starts outside of the apartment, like right in front. And this is where I realized my other mistake. I had lived in this apartment during COVID when there was a curfew and less people were out and about, so it wasn't super loud. It was so loud, and I know that sounds picky because the DR is a loud country, but like it was next level. Like constant revving of motorcycles going by, and if you've been here, if you've been to a country that uses a lot of motorcycles, you know how loud it is. And both me and my friend were working full time. My friend was in and out of meetings every day, like all day, every day. And we're like, we're literally not gonna be able to work here. So we realized it's not gonna work again. And we're like, well crap, we can't stay here. So during that time frame, I had found another Airbnb that's near Pucamaima, which is a very quiet area. And we're like, you know what, we're gonna have to just take this. We wanted to go see it first because we were like paranoid at that point, but there wasn't time, we were gonna have to just get out. So we booked that Airbnb, which ended up being absolutely amazing, like a total godsend. But we had to get out of the apartment we were in, and we knew the lady who was renting it to us wasn't gonna be happy about it, and she wasn't. So Johan comes and like explains to her, and we lied, flat out just lied, and we said, okay. We basically just said that I had a family emergency and I was leaving the country, which is not great, I understand, but we knew if we just said we were trying to leave, she wouldn't have let us, basically. So yeah. We did that. We had to pack everything again. And the sucky thing, right before we had to start moving for the 2 times, we had just gone grocery shopping. So we're moving groceries every single time we do this. We're moving all of our suitcases, all our clothes, like everything, every time we do it, every time we move. But after that, we get to the new apartment. It is beautiful. It's super quiet. And there was a washer and a dryer, which is really rare here, which is great also because I could wash and dry all my clothes, which any of the bugs that got into my stuff died, obviously. And the irony of it all, we looked up the bugs again. Like we took one and put it in a plastic bag, and we looked it up and compared it to bed bugs. We don't think they're bed bugs. Like after all that, we're like, actually, that's definitely not a bed bug. But we still felt better being out of that apartment, the first one, the first Airbnb, because it was so dirty, it was so gross. And like the fact that there was bugs in general on the bed is disgusting. Like regardless of if they were actual bed bugs or not, it was gross. So that was my horrible experience with Airbnb in the DR. Technically not rented through Airbnb, but found through Airbnb. So if you want to know what Airbnb this is, if you're coming to the DR, just comment or private message me on Instagram or something, and I will let you know. Because on paper it looks like a really nice Airbnb, but it's not. And make sure you rent through Airbnb if you're at all uncomfortable with the listing, so that you have the protection of the company itself, so that they can just refund you, because it's a mess if that ever happens. But yeah, that's the story of my Airbnb experience from hell, basically. Thank you for watching, and I will talk to you guys soon.